Therefore,
Yeah.
safe spaces on
Cognitive
campus
dissonance.
need to beat it. How can you progress in any way with safe spaces?
Sorry, I just burped. I hope you didn't hear that.
All right, next one.
Hooray, hooray.
Do you want me to read this? No, you read this one to me.
Do I read this?
Yeah,
okay.
you read this one to me.
How do you find the balance between guiding students toward an accepted interpretation of a text, the reason you assigned it in the first place, while still allowing space for innovation and students' own individual readings?
Okay, this is a really interesting question because of our specific disciplines. So in my course, we have a whole topic about teaching controversial subjects. The courts have demanded and society expects teachers, even in public school settings that are secular and non-secular, to raise topics that are controversial. So I want you to think about teaching evolution in a Catholic school or a denominational school that is private, faith-based school. The courts have demanded that we speak about these controversial subjects, and so how do you interpret the text that you're trying to teach? And so, for example, the interpretation of a religious text in a religious school. And depending on if the teacher is religious or not, it basically becomes one of having critical thought and critical engagement with the texts in some ways, but as the instructor, trying to lead them in the right direction. These are the themes and concepts that we find are important in the field of law and ethics and education. So that's how I start that, but I'm more interested in how you do that in a field of arts, where people think that it's not about your interpretation, it's open to, it's subjective in some sense, where the law is not like that at all.
Yeah, I see the difference. So in literature, certainly there are preferred readings of
Preferred
text.
readings. Interesting. How you
in teaching, for example, like Jane Austen, she can be read as a subversive writer as well as a conservative writer. And so I always tell students, as long as you situate Jane Austen within that continuum somewhere, right? And then you interpret her work as subversive, as like a feminist, or as a conservative writer who appropriates traditional, normative ideas of gender or whatever, right? Just situate yourself and then understand how you're interpreting the text and why, right? By context.
Right, so you have to show me evidence through the text of whatever position that you take, whether it's subversive or conservative. Yeah, my course is a bit more difficult because law isn't as open to interpretation as we like to think. We use the Charter, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, a lot in my class, and Section 1 is the superseding section of them all. And right in it, it says, that these rights and freedoms listed below are subject to such reasonable limits prescribed by law in a free and democratic society. So there is some room for interpretation, but the only interpretation is that it's reasonable, which I think aligns quite well because you're using reasons through the text to explain or support or defend your position. How do you find the balance?
Like at least in the literature and the arts, humanities, like I always just remind students that there is no wrong answer to your interpretation, right? This is how new research is born, right? Because someone thinks of original ideas, right? But that idea is situated in context and relation to scholarship that came up before, right? Building upon research.
So I'm gonna contrast with that because we can't have student teachers who are responsible for a vulnerable population of humans leave our classes as this is open to your interpretation. Negligence, let's say, keeping students safe, and having the right kinds of behaviors and actions set in place that make sure that students are safe. We can't say, please interpret this as you please, what negligence is. It's like, this is negligence or it's not, right? And so we give them case studies and things to learn from.
It's more objective, right?
Yeah, it tends to be more objective than something like interpreting an art. Like lyrics or poetry or novels.
Because the humanities is about the exploration of ideas, right? So you should never cap that, I feel.
Right.
Whereas,
so how do you progress if you do that? Yeah, well said.
I am shaking it up, and then I will choose another question for Jordan because his hands don't fit.
No.
Here you are.
Okay. Next question. How can we stop treating students as quote unquote clients when we need to, that we need to please in the 21st century? Yeah, how do you feel about this one? Do you want me to start?
My question is, have you ever thought of your students as clients?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think that's important in some respects,
Okay.
yes. So we have to remember that the students that come to our campuses, they pay a lot of money to come to our campuses and our classrooms to learn something. And
Okay.
I think that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah.
But not for the purpose of just removing it and using it as a good somewhere else. But it has to be intrinsic as well to get the inherent quality out of learning anything. But that being said, like I said, I think it's really important to keep in mind that you have to service them, right? So maybe the word client, and that the author of this question put quotes around that.
Yeah.
Maybe client isn't the right word, but surely to be held accountable to my students in my room.
Yes.
Surely does matter. It puts pressure on me to do a great job, and I think that's an important perspective to keep.
That I agree.
Yeah.
Right? Do I consider my students as clients? No,
Yeah.
not really. Like I would feel as a student kind of like offended by that, right? Instead, what I say to my students is, you are my junior colleagues, right? You are junior cultural studies scholars, right? That's more inspiring, isn't it? I don't work at a store. I'm an instructor, right?
Yeah,
that cares about my students.
I think you might be taking the interpretation of client like as a business thing, maybe a bit too literal.
Okay.
So it's not like I think about my students as clients. They're still students.
Yeah.
Especially in my case, they're student teachers, and so there's lots of dynamics happening here. However, I have to remember that the students in my room are there to learn something. They're there to take things from my class and apply them later in their lives. And so, too many of us, I think, can teach our courses without that in mind. And we teach these huge topics, and the students leave like, what's the point of what we're doing here? And I think that's really important to keep in mind. So maybe not a client as per like, let me service you and make money off of it, although that's exactly what's occurring. Rolling along, almost there.
Yes. How would you explain concepts that are too advanced for your student, yet to stimulate their interest in learning more?
Yeah. So this is a difficult one to do because we have to keep in mind where our students are at. If I remember correctly from my undergraduate days, we call this the N+1.
Okay.
So the N is where your student is currently at, and you don't want to go N+2 or times 2.
Right.
You just want to add a little bit and what's called scaffold their knowledge that way. And so everyone in your room is different, and they all are at different ends, and they all start at different locations. We can't assume that they all start the same.
Yep,
and so it's really about what that +1 means to those students, and that's easier to do in a small classroom.
Yeah.
As you personally know them and see them and assess their learning as they go. Very difficult to do in a large classroom. The last thing I'll say is that remember that we are actually beholden to this on our USRIs. One of the Likert scales measurement systems is, has encouraged me to look deeper into the content, and that's a difficult thing to do. That is another one of those things where you try to inspire your students to keep looking. That this isn't the limit of ethics and law in education. This is a very surface level kind of thing, and there's lots more to this. Explore the depth and breadth of it. And I think it's really important to do that probably at the end of every single lecture, is that you remind and kind of do a review. This is what we studied today, but there's lots more to this. Perhaps you should look at this text or look into this law or the school act, etc. as you go. Just try to keep that there, just little golden nuggets. Yeah.
Golden nuggets.
Golden nugget is what I call that. Yeah.
That's a good term.
How do you do that?
My question is, why would you bring in concepts that are too advanced for your students if you're trying to stimulate their interest, right?
Yeah, this the articulation of this question, that are too advanced for your students,
Yeah.
is interesting. You might want to think that's a flawed question, but
My response is, if you are an expert in X concept or X theory, then you should be able to explain it in a way that is simple enough for students to grasp, right?
okay.
But if you yourself are struggling with a concept or definition of a term and you're not able to provide concrete examples to support whatever it is that you're trying to say, then that's where students get lost.
Sure.
Right? So I think it depends on your own expertise,
Yeah.
the degree of your own comfort with the knowledge that you're bringing to the class or presenting to the class.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you said that. I interpret this question as a question of pedagogy.
Okay.
And so we like to think of content as the what is taught, and the pedagogy
Okay.
is how you teach the content.
Okay.
And this question, for me, when I think about a really good teacher,
Yeah.
great teachers aren't necessarily experts in their field. They're really good
Okay.
at teaching you what they know,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And so it's not necessarily a matter of content. I think it's about making the connections for students to make the plus one,
Okay.
right? The n plus one. And so surely it helps to know more content.
Yeah.
But my student teachers that are math majors, they don't need to know what they're studying in math here, I would argue.
Okay.
What they need to know is the pedagogy of how to teach
How to
math.
teach it, yeah. All right, so I'm choosing a question for Jordan now. Yoink. Here you are.
Thank you. Okay, short one.
Okay.
What do you do if you're really hungry and your stomach is growling, but it's really quiet in class? This is nice. This is a nice little comedic interlude from our very serious questions that we've had so
Yeah,
far.
that's true.
Yeah, hunger. What do you don't eat a lot.
I don't.
Yeah, you don't do a great job of that, I don't think.
My stomach is always growling
Yeah.
when I'm teaching.
That's not okay. That's
so
not okay.
what was the question? How do we
What do
deal
you
with it?
do?
Oh,
What do you do when your stomach's growling and it's too quiet in class?
Well, when I'm, lecturing, and I'm walking, right? And then all of a sudden my stomach growls. Like the people in the first row, I'm sure they can hear it. I ignore it. Sorry.
My best advice is to
Yeah.
eat.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, my best advice is to be like, you know what? Wow, I'm hungry. I'm going to make sure to prepare for my class by eating before class,
That is
so that I feel, much more centered and with it, and so
Yeah.
I'm not, your
Oh,
brain
I
can't
see.
work unless it's fed.
That's true. That is what responsible teachers do, right? Like they eat before they teach. But
Yeah.
sometimes, like honestly, like when you have meeting after meeting and
Sure.
then you have to teach, like you really don't have that time to like go eat something.
Yeah.
Sometimes my friends, colleagues, just eat, tell me to eat like a granola bar.
Banana.
I don't like bananas. Sorry. Or granola bars.
So pick something that you like. No, your point's a good one. Your point is that when we're too busy,
Yeah.
we're often too busy. You're going from faculty meetings to class,
Yeah.
straight to your own PhD work or something
Yeah.
like that, where it's taking up a lot of time and you don't really think about eating. But for me, that's a flawed way to think.
It is.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs had told us years
Yes.
ago, right? We cannot get to any kind of intellectual self-actualization unless we have our immediate needs met, and that
Yes.
includes food.
Yes. Are you against instructors eating while teaching? Like, I mean, not like a sandwich or like a hamburger, but like
Sure.
something like berries or nuts or something
Yeah,
like something
like a Cliff
small.
Bar or
Yeah.
something like that. Absolutely not.
Okay.
You can do so in a way that you can do that strategically. So when you're doing in small group work or class discussions, that's when you take a couple of bites. You got to worry about the seeds in your teeth, or I get that all the time, honestly. So here's
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I usually try to eat half an hour before my
Okay.
lecture, and then I brush my teeth
Okay.
to make sure there's
Okay.
nothing in there, as if that matters.
Right.
Sometimes I think it does. It can
Right.
bring attention away.
Right.
I have absolutely no problem with students eating in class and instructors eating
Yeah,
in
me
class.
too.
It's
I don't know.
yeah, something you got to do.
I
We
see.
know that well. We know that in order to learn well, you have to be nourished. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's true. And to teach well, right?
Exactly.
So solution: eat. Try
Care.
to eat 30 minutes before class.
That's right.
Take care of yourself.
Care for nourishment for sure, and it doesn't have to be anything big, like you said.
Yeah,
Apple, banana, whatever.
that's true. or channel your inner robot.
That's what Mimi does.
that is
Seems
what
to be
do.
working quite well.
Until I'm 40.
Yeah, exactly. Long term. You gotta think long term.
That's true. Okay, next question. That's funny.
That was a good question.
It just